This is Glenn Healy.
Hi, this is Braden Holtby.
This is Daryl Sutter.
Hi, this is Brian Burke.
This is Jordan Tutu.
This is Keith Morrison.
This is Kelly Rudy.
Hi, this is Scott Hartnell.
Hey, everybody. My name is Theo Fleury.
This is Tim McAuliffe of Sportsnet, and you're listening to the Sean Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. Holy Dinah, is it a scorched day? Like, it is warm, shall we say. I got to give a shout-out to all the graduating students. Grad is upon us, and we had a neighborhood girl, Sarah, shout out to you, come over and watch kids, and she just graduated, and we got talking to her. It sounds like there was some fun had this year, which is good. I mean, we all know kids find ways to have fun every year, but happy to see grad starting to go again. And to all the kids, best of luck in the future. High school, you always think it's the best days of your life. I don't know what everybody else says, but college was certainly a lot of fun, or if you go to university. And I just fast forward to now. And man, I'm having a lot of fun. It's been 17 years now, folks, since I graduated. Think about that. I'm closing in on my 20-year. Geez, that's a mind blow for a Wednesday morning. Anyways, before we get on to today's episode, if you haven't listened to part one, by all means, it was Monday's episode. It was 184, part one. You can go back and listen to Andrew and the first half of our conversation. This is the second half. But before we get there, let's get to today's episode sponsors, Jim Spenrath and team over at Three Trees Tap and Kitchen. Community superstar. I like how they put this on social media. Trisha Hunter. I don't think that could be more bang on for the lady who donates a ton of her time to a bunch of different groups around town. Well, they raised, in partnership with Bike for Breakfast, Three Trees raised $1,000 with beef dips and growler fills. Like, you guys are awesome. And on social media, Trisha Hunter stopped by to pick up the check, so there's a good picture with her and Jim. For me, tonight is date night, and of course, I'm taking the wife to Three Trees, and I'm going to have to try a couple of their beverages. And who knows, maybe I'll try one of the infamous or famous, I don't know, beef dips. Don't do like me. Make sure you call and get a reservation, 780-874-7625. I like to live dangerously. What can I say? Jen Gilbert and team, for over 45 years, since 1976, the dedicated realtors of Coldwell Banker Cityside Realty have served Lloydminster and the surrounding area. They offer star power, providing their clients with 7-day-a-week access. Service is a priority because they know big life decisions are not made during office hours. Also, did you know when it comes to rental properties, they are the biggest licensed residential property management company in the city of Lloydminster? They deal with over 250 rental units. We're talking houses, apartments, and condos. All right? Now, they know home is truly where awesomeness happens. Coldwell Banker, Cityside Realty, for everything real estate, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Give them a call, 780-875-3343. Mac Construction, they've been doing business locally for over 12 years with over 100 homes completed. Mac Construction is a design, build, custom home building operation that has specialized in constructing homes, custom homes, cottages, and RTMs throughout Lloydminster and the community since 2008. And in addition to custom home building, Mac Construction does extensive renovations to residence and light commercial work. So when the wife says, hey, really like to do up the kitchen a little better. My wife has never said that. You could give Mac Construction a little call, and they can come in and do the work for you. If you're looking to build, or if you're looking to build the dream house, because that conversation has never happened either, head to macconstruction.ca and look no further. And I'm ragging on my wife right now, but I really do love her. HSI Group, they are the local oil field burners and combustion experts that can help make sure you have a compliant system working for you. The team also offers security, surveillance, and automation products for residential, commercial, livestock, and agricultural applications. They use technology to give you that peace of mind so you can focus on the things that truly matter. And, as everybody's heading to the lake, wouldn't you like to just sit at the lake and pop open your phone and know your business or your livestock or your house is, no issues there? Well, they got that capability. Just saying. Stop in today, 3902 52nd Street, or give Brody or Kim a call at 306-825-6310. If you're looking for the SNP billboard, it is across from the airport now. I got to give a shout out to Read and Write For all your outdoor signage, give them a call, 306-825-5111. Gartner Management is a Lloydminster-based company specializing in all types of rental properties to help meet your needs. Whether you're looking for a small office or a 6,000 square foot commercial space, give Wade Gartner a call, 780-808-5025. And if you're heading into any of these businesses, let them know you heard about them from the podcast, right? Now, let's get on to that T-Bar 1 tale of the tape. Originally from South Africa, he's been a medical doctor for 15 plus years, family man and concerned citizen. I'm talking about Andrew Liebenberg. Here's part 2. So buckle up. Here we go.
This is Andrew Liebenberg. Welcome to the Sean Newman podcast. Yeah, it just perplexes me, and I think that's one of the big lessons and something that we need to dialogue about. And, public health agencies globally that are essentially hiding data and standing like Merck, they changed, there was never an issue with ivermectin safety, but now all of a sudden they've put out a statement on their website that they have safety concerns around ivermectin. So, and that's...
Well, you want to talk about strange. I follow these websites. That's what it'll sound like. But when W.H.O changed it was this past Monday, the verbiage changed to, and now you can't see it. I should have taken a picture of it because I was shocked a little bit. Because here in Saskatchewan, Alberta, in the mail you get your shot, any shot, as soon as possible, 12 and up. Doesn't matter your age, get the shot. WHO comes out on Monday and says, basically, we do not recommend anyone from the 12 to 17 age range get the shot. Well, I don't know. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to put these two things up and go, the World Health Organization just said, don't vaccinate 12 to 17. My province is saying that everybody 12 and older get vaccinated. Something is off here. Right? Obviously, there's something wrong there.
Yeah.
I slide into, and I should point out now what they've said is children and adolescents tend to have milder disease compared to adults. So unless they are part of a group at higher risk of severe COVID-19, it is less urgent to vaccinate them than older people, those with chronic health conditions, and health workers. More evidence is needed on the use of different COVID-19 vaccines in children to be able to make general recommendations on the vaccinating of children against COVID-19. Now, I want to tie that into...
Is that from the WHO website?
That is as of today. So
right.
As of Sunday night, that is, before I came here, I listened to Dr. Francis Christian, who... U of S, Saskatchewan, who just had, gets let go from his position for speaking out about children being vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
And, I followed it and I was like, oh, okay, that's getting a little close to home. That makes the old heart beat a little faster. And then he recorded his Zoom call, I believe, with his superiors. And he was saying to them, the WHO has already come out and said they don't recommend it. And they were cutting him off and just being like, you don't know what you're talking about. I was on there. You're living in a fantasy world. And I actually had to call my brother before I came in here because I'm like the WHO, I did read that on a website. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. So then I went back, and that's what I just read is what they've changed it to now. And, I don't know what your thoughts on Dr. Francis Christian is, and the rest of doctors being censored, but him being so close to us. One of the things he was pushing was COVID does not pose a threat to our kids. The risk of them dying of COVID is less than 0.003%. This is even less than the risk of them dying of the flu. There is no emergency in children.
I think that's an interesting statement. There is no emergency in children. And I think if we reflect back on this, and also if I look at the broader picture of health and we think of, what the tragedy of COVID for kids has been, their loss of healthy community, loss of healthy lifestyle. which are foundational for development, right? And that's where the risk for kids is. And I'm going to go back to what you've said there with, and Dr. Christian. I mean, it's incredibly brave to speak out. And if I read his letter, and I think he sounds like a wise, rational. He sounds like an experienced doctor with caution. And there's nothing for him to gain in speaking out in his community. And he has not been. I think the important thing is he's not been speaking out against vaccines. He's been speaking out about the vaccination of healthy children in a way that has not included proper informed consent, which requires full disclosure of risk. And the fact is, a lot of risk is unknown, so one needs to be honest about that. So sweeping statements like vaccines are safe and effective, they kind of don't mean much if you have new vaccine technology that is awesome. Like mRNA technology is incredible, and it's going to have incredible applications for the future for rare genetic diseases, and genetic diseases which cause a huge amount of suffering but have no treatment, and cancers where the side effect profile would probably be way better than chemotherapy. So there's a huge potential application there, and I mean, and the great thing about vaccines with them is it's very quick to roll it out. But I think to go to ethics of medicine, basic principles of medical ethics are autonomy, firstly, beneficence, so do good, non-malfeasance, do no harm, and that's the Hippocratic Oath was, first do no harm, and then justice. And now, if a doctor is tried for malpractice or negligence, we tried on these ethical principles. So we're legally bound to the ethical practice of medicine. So I do anesthesia. I have to get informed consent with every patient that I do. And even though, like for a spinal anesthetic, for instance, which is incredibly safe, like it's literally safe enough to not really for your average patient to not do a conversation beforehand on risks and benefits. But I still have to discuss a 1 in 100,000 risk of a spinal hematoma or infection in the spine, which could leave someone paralyzed. Now with a spinal, it's in my career, I've never seen it personally in me or any of my colleagues. And so it's an incredibly rare thing, but I still have to mention that because for that individual patient, they need to know, and we need to put it in words that they understand. But they have to have full disclosure of risks in words that they understand so that they can make a decision based on their own risk-benefit profile. And I think this is where public health and clinical medicine, the approach differs, whereas public health is looking at reaching a target. Clinical medicine is looking at the individual in front of you. And now these are our Western ethics. Autonomy is sacrosanct. It is, we cannot force treatment on an individual. And we take that very seriously. And then beneficence and non-malfeasance is basically risk-benefit. So where harm potentially outweighs benefit, you don't do it. And if you do, you are exposing yourself to malpractice or negligence, right? If you end up with a complication. If I got a complication, I've never had a case of clinically significant aspiration. I have to mention that to every patient that I do an anesthetic to, because if I don't mention it, or dental damage, you've got a fantastic hockey gap there.
It is getting fixed.
No, it's classic. But like that's one of the biggest reasons for lawsuits against anyone doing anesthesia is dental injury. If I don't mention the risk of dental injury, I can be sued and I'm liable, right?
So why aren't more doctors, clinicians, everyone administering the vaccine and everything then scared like the other way to like where they should be like, man, we got to talk about this because maybe there is a lot of problems and maybe we don't know them all. If that could come back on them, shouldn't that scare them to where you're sitting, to where they want to talk about it?
Well, I would imagine that. And I think it depends on whether you're, as a doctor, the problem is doctors are busy. Very few doctors have got time to go and read up on extra literature after work. We are snowed under with administrative load. Admin is such a burden on physicians these days, and the electronic health records. There's so much work outside of actually seeing and treating patients. So after that, to go and read up on journals when you're snowed under with information. So we rely on expert bodies to give us guidelines that filters down guidelines and protocols. We rely on that. Just like maybe as a hockey player, you'd rely on your coach to come with different strategies and game plans while you're focusing on your game.
On your game, yeah, okay.
And I think we've always trusted that. And now I think one of the lessons going forward, I don't know that the WHO has lost a bit of, maybe not. I mean, I was maybe step back there, but certain health agencies like Anthony Fauci specifically, where you couldn't talk about a lab leak hypothesis a year ago, where it's so clearly as a doctor, you make a differential diagnosis, you have different options. It was an option for sure. There's a biotech lab right there doing gain of function research on bat coronaviruses right there in Wuhan. So it's like in a game of Cluedo or whodunit. It's one of the suspects for sure. It doesn't mean it was it. And then the wet market, sure, that's up there. But when they never found an animal that actually carried that virus, and the closest bats were how many, hundreds of thousands of miles away, whatever. I mean, I don't know the distance, so I speak under correction there. So it was a smoking gun. But if you spoke about it, you were censored. Your reputation was people on YouTube who had YouTube channels, they were demonetized. And now all of a sudden, it looks like it was that all along. Or now it's a plausible hypothesis. It was a plausible option all along, but you couldn't. So I think one of the challenges is, are we going to trust these experts? And I think we need to look at conflict of interest. People who are giving us guidelines, is their academic department dependent on big pharmaceutical funding? So if they give the wrong guidelines, if they, don't recommend remdesivir, which is $3,000 for one treatment course for one patient, got emergency use authorization after very limited data, like pharmaceutical sponsored study with marginal benefit and significant side effect profile. Anyway, that gets pushed through. But so if you're on an advisory panel or an advisory group, and your clinic, you might not be getting money directly. You get a government salary, but your university department or your research program, your lab is dependent on a grant that ultimately through an intermediary comes from a big pharmaceutical company. And we need to know, I think big pharmaceutical industry, or the pharmaceutical industry is I think the biggest lobbying group in the USA. So bigger than oil and gas, bigger than the agricultural industry. So why are they spending so much money on lobbying? And where does funding for research come from? Where does funding for these advisory boards? And that's why I take someone like Dr. Tess Lowry in the UK. She has the British ivermectin research group, and she's a medical doctor, and then she has a PhD. She also has done epidemiology, and she's a number cruncher. She collates and organizes statistics and safety data on drugs and puts in a presentable form for bodies like the WHO. So she is contracted to that, but her funding, she is a watchdog agency, so she's funded by the public. And when she is speaking, saying, hey, ivermectin works, and trying to promote that, and raising some alarm about potential harms from vaccines, I think one needs to listen. I know I don't see a conflict of interest there, so I think one would listen there. And I think when we get back to ethics, autonomy, informed consent, it's only honest to say, especially if a parent comes in with a healthy child, and now before the WHO changed their recommendation now, say 2 weeks ago, when we knew that there was a concern about myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, the jury's still out, but it's only, it is simply ethical to have that discussion with parents that come in asking about vaccination of their 13-year-old or 12-year-old. You say, listen, it looks like there could be there's growing numbers of kids with myocarditis, inflammation of the heart. Your child is healthy. Your child's not in a high-risk group for a vaccine adverse or for COVID. It'd be different if your child has severe asthma, severely obese, cystic fibrosis, whatever. There's certain high-risk groups that where the benefit of vaccination is clearly there. But I think for very low-risk groups and pregnant women, pregnant women who were excluded from original clinical trials, I think just to have some caution and to be honest about unknown long-term risk. And that's not being an anti-vaxxer, that's being honest. And I think what we are doing now, I think the public is going to be less trusting of public health agencies. I think we need to show that integrity, we need to show honesty, we need to show that we care for, we have a big picture view, we have this public health program, we're aiming for targets, but we're not going to sacrifice an individual's autonomy for the sake of that target. And that's the question, is it right to vaccinate kids to protect the elderly? That's an important ethical question, and it's not. There's no easy answer there. One has to sit down, and that's where we need the wisdom of many, and where we need to be able to sit around a table and honestly share different opinions. And as a parent who had a son who's went through cancer, who's been on chemotherapy, those things, you realize a rare thing can happen to your child. And we're talking about, rare risk on both sides. But there needs to be an honest conversation around that, not just a sweeping statement, I think. And I think, clearly now with the WHO changing the recommendations, we're going to need to sit down and have those honest conversations. And when they do look at starting vaccination of kids again, one's going to have to do it cautiously with the children in mind. And I think that's it. That child in front of you, that real person who has a long future ahead of And then just on the other principle of medical ethics, just so that it's comprehensive, the other principle is justice. And this is really important to bring this into the conversation. We're vaccinating low-risk groups in the first world, while in the third world, in the global south, there are healthcare workers who don't have access to vaccines. There are elderly, there are people with diabetes and heart disease who fall into high-risk group for COVID that don't have access to vaccines. Yet we're aiming for these local targets, and I think it's short-sighted because it's a global pandemic, right? So now the Delta variant is going to come this way. We can't close our borders forever and be an island, and we need to consider the justice in the the inequity that has happened with the vaccine rollout and the little access that high-risk groups have had in the third world and developing countries, and then even in some first world countries, the wastage, So these are important discussions and conversations to have.
I was curious, I was going to hop in there just before. Can you not have, like, in your role, can you not have the conversation with people who walk through the door? They got their 12-year-old, their 13-year-old. Can you not tell them just maybe not get the vaccine?
Well, I don't have a family practice at the moment, so I haven't I haven't done that personally, and we don't sit in on, individual doctors. I think there'll be a spectrum. There'll be certain doctors who the only information they have is what they've got from
the board above them
that have filtered down, and they think, well, no, it's recommended, so you should do it. I think there's more nuance, and I'm sure a lot of family physicians understand the nuance, and I want to read something really important. Sure. So this is the Canmeds Physician Competency Framework. So it's the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and this is what they expect from a family physician in Canada. And there are different Canmeds roles. There are 6 or 7 different roles. I'll just touch on a couple of them. And one is medical expert. And this is under the description of that. So, as medical experts who provide high quality, safe, patient-centered care, physicians draw upon an evolving body of knowledge. And that's the thing. We know that recommendations change as we get more information. So draw upon an evolving body of knowledge, their clinical skills, and their professional values. They collect and interpret information, make clinical decisions, and carry out diagnostic and therapeutic interventions. They do so within their scope of practice and with an understanding of the limits of their expertise. The decision-making is informed by best practices and research evidence and takes into account the patient's circumstances. So you can't put everyone in one box. You're taking it's patient-centered care, so you're considering the individual in front of you.
So what do you think then? I'm a guy sitting here who hasn't got the vaccine, and now I'm labeled an anti-vaxxer, which is an odd thing to get told. I sit back and look at all the information that I've been able to curate and pull together through my abilities. But like you say, Google and the ability to see what's going on around the world and hear very smart people talk on it. I just put myself in an age range where I'm not concerned. And then I guess I'm not concerned overly about going down the road of something very, very bad. And then on top of it, I hear so much talk about ivermectin.
Right.
What do you think of the government and how many billions of dollars they've spent and how they're pushing for everyone to just get the jab? I mean, the different slogans that have gone on, from giving kids ice cream in Ontario to lotteries, right? There's a lottery in Alberta. There's a lottery in Saskatchewan. There was a lottery for free tuition in Lethbridge.
Right.
I don't know what anybody else calls that. Is that not coercion? Is that not trying to buy consent to like try and pull me in? And I just stared and I go, this is really weird. Like you go through the framework of what a doctor's supposed to be and what a clinician is supposed to do and how they're supposed to operate. When you see what's going on, and the fact that you mentioned early on that pharmacies aren't allowed to give out ivermectin, that's what they've been told, and doctors aren't, in the city aren't allowed to give it to them because there's no research, and yet there's research going on that makes it clear. You sitting there, do you not go, like, I assume it's one of the reasons why you're sitting across from me, but do you not just, like, what is going on? This is unnerving.
Yeah, I mean, it's informed consent should not include any coercion, for sure. Now, I'm going to.
Well, here
I'm
don't want to put.
I'm going to share another experience, and people might be, and it goes with public health targets. So I've worked in another part of the world where there were sterilization targets. Okay, now people might be surprised to learn that in poor countries, World Bank loans often have strings attached. Like you got to reach certain sterilization targets, etc.
Well, you got to stop there for a second. I got to make sure I got this in my brain right. So you get a loan, and with it comes sterilization targets. So you're talking about women can't have children anymore, or
yeah. So you can in some countries you get the extreme, like in China where they had the one-child policy.
Right.
That's the extreme of it. But government agencies in certain poorer countries have got sterilization targets. Certainly in the hospital where I worked, there were targets, and in meetings, if we didn't do X amount of sterilizations a month, there was pressure put on us, and it's difficult to talk about this because it's actually quite shocking. So there would be now it's very convenient to have a sterilization at a cesarean section because you're already you have an open abdomen, so it's very easy to go and to just finish up with a quick tubal ligation and
snip the tubes, you're saying.
Yeah. So, but now this is pregnancy. If you and sure, there is rationale for you to advocate for smaller families. There's more opportunity for kids. So there's a lot of rationale. It doesn't mean it's this bad thing. It's not just population control or whatever. It can be, to advocate in poorer communities, to advocate for smaller families means more opportunity. There's more chance that a family with a few kids, that one of those kids will finish school and maybe go to university. Nutrition is less chance of malnutrition, that sort of thing. So I think that's the rationale. So the people making these decisions are not necessarily bad, but just I stood up against it, and I was called a troublemaker, it's just so frustrating. I really advocate for ethical healthcare, and I said, this is pregnancy. You've got 9 months, and at least, even if they present late at the clinic, you're going to have at least a few antenatal clinic visits. But, presumably you're going to have 3 to 6 months of clinic visits where a nurse can sit down with this patient, with their partner or husband, and discuss the option of sterilization. And that's part of good health promotion, If their family is at a good size already, and that another child will put significant socioeconomic pressure on them, that would be fine, and that's informed consent, and they have time to think about it. You can give them information and they can make a decision, and they can say, in the case of an emergency cesarean section, yes, and you have that form signed and in your file, so the doctor knows, great, we're free to go ahead. Now consent would often be taken with a woman in labor before an emergency cesarean section. So say it's obstructive labor, a woman's been in labor for 12, 15 hours, whatever, they're in pain, they're exhausted. And then to go to them, and they may be 24 years old with their second child, and it's an emergency Caesar, so you don't know what the outcome of that's going to be, whether the child's going to make it or not. And maybe it's their third child, whatever, but to go to that woman who is under duress, really, and to say, listen, we're going in to do you want us to tie your tubes? You can't tell me that person's going to make the same decision as what they would made if they had had a counseling session under different circumstances where they could think about it, talk to their husband or partner, talk to their community, whatever. If you've been in labor, if you're in pain, the last thing you want to do is go through this again. So a lot of, so anyway, so that is an example of consent done under duress. And I think, I feel it's unethical. Now, I don't, hopefully that's not happening anymore, right? That was many years ago. Yeah.
Trying to remember, we had our third Casey, and we had emergency C-section, and in the emergency C-section, our doctor cut Mel's tubes. In saying all that, we'd talked about it for so long after the third we were going to have it done. But I know what you mean when that was probably the roughest day of my life. Was those, I don't know how many hours that was. I can't remember because it felt like an eternity. Almost brings tears back to me thinking about that moment. And we made that decision, and stand by it. We talked about it so much that the third was going to be our last and everything else. But I also go back to when we'd had our second kid, and my doctor at the time, I wanted to get the SNP. I was like, yeah, we're done. She's like, you know what? Wait 8 months and come back to me. Yeah. And if she just booked me the appointment, our third kid doesn't happen.
Right.
And what you're talking about is just time and deloading the stress and getting a feel for where you're at in life and whether you want another one or anything else. It's one of the lovely things about the country we live in is that there is no stipulation on how small or big your family can be. You can, I got good friends with 6 kids. Not that I was looking for 6, but I understand what you're talking about and the stress, because the 2 moments just are so perfect. Just give it 6 months. I'll book you in 6 months if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, in 6 months or 8 months, whatever it was. I'd forgotten all about it, and we were trying for our third, right? And on the flip side, and then the next one. And once again, I can't speak highly enough about the doctor. He saves my wife's life, saves my child's life, and in the middle of it, does what we'd asked him to do, right? But at the same time, I remember him asking her, I can't remember now because that's such a blur of a moment, and that's what you're talking about, right? Right there. And I don't know if you'd given me 8 months if we would have had a fourth and we would have decided, or that was it. I certainly know at the time that was it. I was stressed to the nines. That's a pretty impactful story actually on myself because I felt both sides of that. And in Canada, we're fortunate that once again you don't have a size limit to the family.
Yeah, and it's the reality in other parts of the world, and that's why we also talk about freedoms. I think we take it for granted, freedoms that we have. And one thing I couldn't find it now, and I'm not gonna waste your time. But in the Canmeds framework, they talk about the need to make ethical decisions in the light of uncertainty, and uncertainty in medicine that's what we learn. There is uncertainty. You always, you have a differential diagnosis. You have a prognosis, which is a rough guide, but there's so much uncertainty. And I think if we can sit down and have an honest discussion, if we can have less of a political, like election type of campaign, because I think it's worked this time, but in the long run, it might erode trust in health systems. Whereas I think if we are more honest about unknown long-term effects of experimental medications, experimental vaccines, which it will be awesome if we learn and if we can make vaccines quickly and safely. I mean, it's a huge breakthrough it's a huge scientific breakthrough, but we've got to be honest about it, and we've got to walk that learning curve, and we've got to be honest about that there are going to be some mistakes along the way. There is uncertainty, and I think there should be more effort in teaching doctors how to have those conversations with patients honestly, in the light of uncertainty, in the light of, like, if something's only been used for 4 months, in the wide public, how do you try and gauge a 2-year side effect profile, or a 5-year side effect profile, or on a 12-year-old, a 20-year-old? Or how do you deal with if a mom comes to you and said, they see their studies now that shows that there's accumulations of the lipid nanoparticles around the ovaries? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
So the honest question is, we don't know. We don't know, and time will tell. And I know, like in reproductive toxicology studies, you've got to wait sometimes a generation. Now, I had another story. I had a kid on my soccer team growing up. I was 13, and he had one arm. And he was a brilliant soccer player, and he had 50% less chance of doing a handball. So he had an advantage over all of us in soccer. But he was a thalidomide baby.
That's looking at the glass half full, isn't it?
He was such a legend, the happiest kid, and he had one arm.
Yeah.
His arm, and his mom was on thalidomide. And
that's some scary shit what you're talking about right
so,
there.
and the thing is, doctors that were prescribing it, they didn't know. So I think, like, now with pregnant women, for instance, we need to be humble and say there's a lot of uncertainty here.
Yeah.
And people need free access to the vaccine, for sure. And that's the other thing with autonomy. If you are really scared of COVID, if you think if you are in a high risk group, or if your family physician says, hey, if you get COVID, you're in trouble, you need to have access. But it's such a dilemma, like balancing the public health, trying to achieve targets with not violating autonomy. And I think this is where ivermectin could have been and can be a godsend, where it's got really good preventative data. It looks there are a lot of doctors that are taking it, and if you gave people the choice, listen, either get the vaccine or take ivermectin prophylaxis, to do neither is you got two choices and I think a lot of people, ivermectin, they can see it's been out there for 30 years, 1 dose a week. I'm a little unsure about the vaccine, and my personal risk is low because I'm 30 years old and I'm an athlete, and I think that could be a real solution. And why aren't we talking about it? And if you look at that Argentina study where none of the 700 or so that were on ivermectin prevention got COVID, and there are also studies that have looked at if someone gets COVID, then they give ivermectin to the family, to their contacts, and it shuts out the spread. Which is brilliant. Now, why that is a threat to the vaccine rollout, I don't know. But it goes back to, I don't know, profit margins, 50 billion and close to 50 billion annual industry versus cheap repurposed drugs don't make anyone any money. Shareholders don't get their profits. And then that legislation now, why that legislation has to be set in stone. Maybe that's one of the lessons here. Maybe that legislation, it was there for a good reason, to protect the public. In the end, it's actually withholding effective treatments from the public. And why is it a either or? Why can't... So I throw that question out there. Let's talk about it.
Well, I mean, this has been fantastic. It's been really enjoyable just to hear some open discussion on it with a man who knows obviously more than I do. I guess I said back there, you said this is a scary thing you said when you talk about not understanding the long term or even having the vision of like this, what are we doing to the population? You said it took a generation to see the impacts of what had happened. Like, very few people can think like that. Like, very, very, very few. Stick it in my arm, let's get back to normal, we'll carry on with life, right? It's one of the most troubling things I hear right now, Andrew. A lot of people, why aren't you getting the vaccine? I don't know. Why did you get the vaccine? I want to travel. Like, I don't know. They haven't. I could be wrong, but I haven't heard of anybody saying you can't travel around without the vaccine yet. Now, there are hoops you got to jump through, for sure. The next is, I just want it back to normal. Okay? But we can, as a population, we can, wait and see what's coming down the pipeline and go through a little bit of pain and hear, all the stories, once again, ivermectin. I don't know enough about it. I've read some articles on it. I've certainly listened to a lot of smart people talk about it, and I go, it seems like at some point this is going to jump through a loophole too, and it's going to become something that's effective and we could do as a population, as a world.
It's worth reading the ivermectin review. Here it is. I'll leave you a copy. So, American Journal of Therapeutics, volume 28 of 2021. And it's a review of the emerging evidence demonstrating the efficacy of ivermectin in the prophylaxis and treatment of COVID-19. And Dr. Pierre Corey, Umberto Meduri, and Paul Marek, I unfortunately don't know much about the other two, but those are three ICU heavyweights. And so it needs to be considered, and we need to think, okay, and it's part of a package of early treatment. So there are other drugs too. Flavoxamine is a repurposed antidepressant, SSRI, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it looks like it's got anti-inflammatory properties. So it looks like it can help with long COVID, and there is some evidence out there that it can help inhaled budesonide. So there's a package of cheap repurposed things that in the USA, where they have a different health system, because it's private, local groups can set up their own protocols. It's not everyone following one protocol. So like the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, they've got their early treatment protocols. And a lot of them also include hydroxychloroquine. And they say that the trials that show that it was dangerous and doesn't work, they were inappropriate because it should be given early on during viral replication. That's when it works. And it should be given at a safe dose. Now, I worked in a rheumatology clinic during my training, and I prescribed it many times for people with psoriatic arthritis and some people with rheumatoid arthritis intolerant to methotrexate, and they can take it safely every day, or 5 days a week for 5 years, and but it's at a safe low dose. But now a lot of the studies that were done, it's the Solidarity trial that looked at a lot of treatments, including hydroxychloroquine, that concluded that it's unsafe. They were using a crazy high dosage, like close to the toxic dose. That's the dose that they were using. And they were using it in sick ICU patients. So they're using it for late complicated disease. Whereas the advocates that are saying, listen, it works at a low dose in early disease. But then it was... You couldn't mention it. But now people are starting to look back and look at those studies, and they're saying, hey, did we miss something there? So if you mentioned it, you were deplatformed, you were censored. So you're welcome to edit this out. But yeah, and because Trump talked about it, it suddenly got political. Like, why must a drug be left or right? Like, since when? That's just ridiculous. Like it's an important drug. It's in the toolbox. So if you use a package of drugs, if each one has a small effect, you could reduce hospitalizations, you could reduce ICU admissions, you could save lives, and that really looks like that's what the data is showing, and yeah, I want to advocate for that.
I gotta ask before I get you out of here on natural immunity. Do you care to talk about it a little bit?
I actually wanted to. Yeah. Now, so very briefly, in a natural immunity is quite complex. It's your immune system's got different branches. So you have and I'm going to just do it in lay terms. So you've got your immediate non-specific response. So that's at your membrane level. So you got barriers, and then you got specific types of antibodies that work at those levels, like your IgA and IgE. But yeah, IgA on mucous membranes, and there are certain types of cells that they just kind of go for anything, and it's immediate, and people with a very healthy immune system that have a good natural immunity will often sort out an infection at that phase and not get sick at all. Like there are viruses that are around all the time, especially at change of seasons and that, and not everyone gets sick. Everyone's exposed. Almost, there's a high level of exposure, but only certain people get sick. And then you have your specific immunity, which is your B and T cells, and they produce antibodies, specific antibodies, create an antibody response against them. Now, antibodies will stick like a lock and key, or like Lego blocks. They'll stick to, like, a specific antibody will stick to a specific antigen, and then you have cells that recognize those antibodies and know to take out that antigen or that pathogen. And you don't always have antibodies or loads of antibodies around in your bloodstream. So you can have good, if you've been infected previously, you can have good memory. So your B and T cells can have immune memory, and where they encounter a pathogen again, like a virus, if you've previously had an infection, they will recognize it immediately because they've seen it before, and they've got that protocols there. So they'll immediately produce lots of antibodies against that and sort it out. And usually you won't get as if you won't get as sick.
So there's people walking around right now that have natural immunity to COVID-19, essentially. Correct?
Well, we know that. People who've been infected, there is natural immunity for sure. And now there are concerns. It's a new virus, so we don't know how sustained is it. But it looks like it is pretty sustained. There's some studies that show after 10 months there's still a very robust immunity. And there are some recommendations that say people who've had COVID previously only need one vaccine shot to just boost that immune memory and response. But there's an interesting trial from SARS-CoV-1, which was 17 years ago, where they did a study where people who had SARS-CoV-1, they looked at their immunity against SARS-CoV-2, and they actually have a significant amount of immunity against SARS-CoV-2, and this is 17 years later, which shows that from SARS-CoV-1 it was a very sustained immune memory, and which carries hope. Like we don't know, this is new, so you can't say it's going to be the same, but that is a immune response to a SARS-CoV virus, the coronavirus, and I think there's an 80% similarity, and so it's a cousin. So there's hope there, and I think when making So and traditionally you would include previously infected people in your calculation of herd immunity. So you would look at the population that has been exposed or previously infected plus those vaccinated to get that herd immunity level. And then it would be interesting if you added a ivermectin prevention arm, you could get huge coverage.
It's cool to hear you talk about ivermectin so highly. It's like kind of like vax. You don't vax. That's the only two options, and it feels like there's this huge option that is being not utilized right now.
Yeah, and I think if I can just say it, I'm not telling people not to get vaccinated, right?
Yeah. No, I think that comes across really clearly.
But I think from like regulatory agencies and I think clinicians, like we need to use all the tools in our toolbox, and I think there will be much better safety, especially for low risk groups. And if I can just share some stats. Interestingly, tetanus vaccine. Now, I've treated a patient with tetanus. I've seen it. It's bad. Okay, young lady got tetanus, and she was in ICU on a ventilator for like 3 weeks. Previously completely healthy. So you don't want tetanus. So if I stand on a rusty nail, I'm getting my tetanus booster, no question. And it was Tess Laurie who looked at the different, from that W.H.O. pharmacovigilance data that's accessible. She looked at the tetanus vaccine, and it was, it's been out since 1968, and there were 36 deaths, 12,000 reported adverse events from the tetanus vaccine. So for that, yes, safe and effective. Awesome. We are grateful for that vaccine. And it'll be awesome if we can have a vaccine in that caliber for coronaviruses. And I think if I can just say I've been reading a little, the Novavax vaccine looks good. It's going through trials now, but that it seems to be have a better safety and efficacy profile, and it looks like it's effective against all variants as well. And it's a more traditional vaccine. Now, for the WHO data on reports of the current coronavirus vaccines, there's this is Tess Laurie, who has the I'm going to see if I've got it here, just so I don't butcher it. Her agency, she has the Evidence-Based Medicine Consultancy Limited. So she collates research and advises public health agencies. And so I haven't personally looked at the data, but from her, and I feel she's reputable, and she says there's a million reported adverse events. Now that's a broad range of different adverse events. It doesn't mean there's causality. It doesn't, but those were reported, and that's part of normal drug safety, the process in drug safety. When you put new drugs on the market, you've got a period where you've got to be looking at adverse events, and then you need experts to filter through it and try and figure out which ones are associated and which ones not. And then in the end, you get your pamphlet inside any medication package, which has that long list of potential side effects. So there's already over 1 million reported side effects and already 6,000 deaths on the WHO database. Now, Tess Laurie looked at UK data, which is really also quite, it shows that there are significant concerns.
What you're talking about, or what I've read, or what I've seen, is VAERS, which is optional reporting. Like, it comes with a whole gambit of they know about some of the errors that come with it. Regardless,
yeah,
I've already seen so many experts talk about how They're up to 6,000 deaths, like you say. And that's more than 40 years of that website being in use compared to all the other vaccines.
Yes.
Like, that's concerning.
So, and I think that's really important. Like, you can't, like, vaccines aren't bad. Like, it's a really important part of our medical toolkit. And there are, like, we want that they play an important role, but it needs to be vaccine development, any medical development and rollout needs to be done ethically. And we need to think hard and fast if we are going to, just throw our ethical foundations out of the window. And that's the thing. Where are the ethical control boards here? Where are the? But it is good to see that, like, the WHO has changed their recommendations now, based on. It's unfortunate. It would have been awesome if there were no adverse events, right? It would have been awesome if there was no myocarditis. It would be awesome if this was. That would be like first prize, right?
Sure.
But unfortunately, you got to be real. Like, you have to, okay, this is really happening. These things are being reported. And they say, like, the VAERS is a US, it's in the United States, their system. Now, it's a criminal offense to fraudulently fill in one of those forms. So for a doctor to fill one in, they're being serious. Also, a patient, it apparently says it on the form. And there was a Harvard study that showed that only 1% of adverse events are actually reported because of the time and the process, and physicians don't get remuneration for it, and so it could be a huge underestimation. Other people say up to 10%, but it could be a huge underestimation. But one has to take it seriously. One has to pause, and one has to have honest conversations.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I just, once again, if you go all the way around the gambit, it just, like, why I have you on, and I'm not just talking to some hockey player and just going down it, is like, my wife's got the vaccine. My parents have the vaccine. I have friends that are getting the vaccine. But I also have friends and family who are not getting it. And it's a very, like, black-white issue. It's very, like, it's difficult. And one side falls this way and the other side goes that way. And I just think, like, I keep hearing all these different stories, and I'm like, I just want to wait. Now, I'm fortunate enough to live in the country I do, to live in the area I do, to be at the age I am. I got a lot of things going the right way for me. But that's okay. And it's okay for me to understand that all. And I just wish more people would maybe take a step back and do, like, it's hours in the day to do the reading and the research and to listen to some people and do some critical thinking. But I just keep coming back to, but we're not, like, this is my body, this is my life. I only get one crack at it, and I want to make sure that if I'm putting it in my arm, I'm doing it because I've done all the research and I've had the hard conversations and brought people on like yourself and listened to just about everything under the sun on it, because I want to know. I want to know for sure that when I do it, it was my choice, it was my decision to make. And I'll be the first to, like, I don't need to put words in your mouth when it comes to the vaccine rollout and how it's been handled and the things they've done and the things they've said in my own country, my own province. It concerns me. And it concerns me more, I think, Andrew, that more people aren't standing up going, like, this is weird. And maybe they are. And maybe the social pressure is unbelievable. And maybe the social pressure has just gotten to more people, and that's fine. So
I had friends and who've come to me and they said that, that their kids being bullied at school because they haven't got the vaccine. Now, I'm not commenting on whether it's right or wrong that they got it. That was their decision, and that's based on the principle of autonomy. But for them to be bullied, that's not the reason to get it, right? Like, that's just wrong.
Listen, I've seen emails go around from companies telling all their employees to get vaccinated. Think about that. right? A company telling you, do the right thing, get vaccinated so we can all go back to work and whatever, blah, 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 blah. Once again, I don't need you to comment on that. I go, that's, to me, it's immoral. That's my choice. I get a choice in this. That's the way I think, at least.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw a question back at you. Like, if the health system was presenting you with the VAERS data, trying to make that, or that within the uncertainty, we know, we have these initial trials, we've used it for so long, there's uncertain 2-year, 5-year, 10-year, but that there could be some estimates on potential long-term safety. But if you were given kind of a package of information with current reported deaths, and that were interpreted in a way to say, okay, how many of those do they think were really associated with a vaccine, and what are the risk factors for that? Like, some of the risks might be, if someone's had a severe inflammatory response to coronavirus, and you've got this antigen overload, this antigen load in your body that your immune system has reacted to, and you've ended up with this multi-system disease. To vaccinate that individual within a short period of time, you're just exposing them to more antigen. Their immune system's already in a hyperinflammatory state, or has recently been in one, and you could simply re-trigger a hyperinflammatory. So there's certain cases where one would really be cautious. And then there's some cases where it's like, nope, listen, for you, your risk benefit, I think you need to go ahead and get it. But if you didn't feel that the authorities or government, whoever, were trying to whitewash information, if you didn't feel forced, if you felt free to make a decision, and you were given honest information, I think that would how would that be different for you?
Well, for one, it would kind of give you a voice in it again, wouldn't it? I mean, one of the cool things that has happened over the last, I would say, probably month and a half, is I've seen more and more doctors starting to step up, and people that are in the front lines and willing to talk about the really bad that's going on that scares everybody, but willing to talk about some of the stuff that's just misinterpreted, or maybe some other things people need to think about. And for so long, I think a huge majority of the population understood that they weren't telling you the whole picture. And they were just trying to fearmonger you of it's really bad, we're all dying, stay at home, don't ever leave there, don't go to a park, don't do nothing. And I think for a month and a half, I think it really worked. I can speak of my situation. I was scared, not only for myself, my wife, my children, my family, friends, right? What's going on?
Initially.
But as time went on, you started to just be like, okay, this isn't the end of the world. And in the last 2 months, I've started to understand that it is really bad. The smartest people in the world are all talking about that it is really bad. Now, for different ages, for different people, underlying conditions, everything you've talked about, it affects them differently. And why we can't talk about that is mind-boggling. What you're asking me is if I came to you and said, listen, you're my doctor, should I get the shot? Well, we get to have a conversation about it, and then that should be okay. If you're saying that, that's what I want out of a physician. That's how you build a relationship. What's happening right now is, if I don't go to the lineup that is however many hours long, get stabbed in the arm, and do what is right for the world, I'm a bad person. And I just take a step back and I go, that's a large question. Because I go there's no data, or not enough of it yet, I would say, that makes me go, like, it's safe, it's proven, I'm totally fine. If anything, I feel like there's more data coming out saying, you should be a little bit, just maybe. And then on top of it, I go, like, I'm not in any of the age groups. I don't have any underlying conditions, XYZ. So I guess what you're asking, I'm trying to let you into how my brain thinks. I just go, what you're asking is if you gave me and you got to have a conversation about it, and you said, you know what, as your doctor, I think this is why, but you got to understand there's a couple things, but here's blah, 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 blah. That's what was happening a year ago. That's what happened all the time. Now we fast forward, and I don't know how many people have that conversation before they have the shot. I don't think that many. I honestly don't think. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Well, yeah, people that I've spoken to, and healthcare workers specifically, I mean, I've been surprised at how little information or how short the discussion. It's, and for sure, with a huge rollout, you need efficiency, and that's important. But again, to throw out or to not have thorough informed consent is, we just got to think, where does this take us in 5 years' time, and what's the difference between, why is there legal immunity for vaccines but not for other things? And I mean, there's so many questions. I think if I can just say, like, as a take home, I mean, people will put me in a box. I think I've tried to speak out in my circles. I've tried to say, like, because there was a question of how do you get more healthcare workers to get vaccinated. That's an issue. So they're trying to roll out. I don't think ice creams and lottery tickets are necessarily going to work there. So I suggested one really aims at stopping to label people, stop putting people in boxes, allow honest debate. Don't just because you're cautious about this new vaccine when you know your personal risk for COVID is low, and okay, there's, if you did do it, it would be to get to that 70% or whatever you'd be, taking for the sake of society or whatever. But when you are cautious because of what you've read and be as a scientist and as a doctor, to be labeled an anti-vaxxer or to be called vaccine hesitant, that's an insult. It's it's so much more complex than that. It's so nuanced. And if we can learn to dialogue, go back to what I said at the start, where we are free to say the unpopular things, to speak about the elephant in the room, to point out that the emperor is not wearing clothes. My seat just sunk. If we can sit around a table and we can put the issues on the table without fear of losing our jobs, and I think we'll end up stronger. We'll have a more robust system. We'll have a health system that people trust, where people feel that, okay, those making the decisions, those in authority positions, actually care about not only the statistics and targets and whatever, but also the individual. They care about me and my family and my kids in the guidelines that they make, in the decisions that they make. And if we could, and I'm not an expert, I'm a generalist, but I know there are experts out there that are being silenced. And one great example is Dr. Pierre Corey, and heavyweight ICU physician. When he presented his ivermectin data to the US Congress, YouTube cut that video, labeled it misinformation. That's a red flag, people. Like, his voice needs to be heard, and he shouldn't need to rely on YouTube for his message to get out. Like, there should be forums where experts are meeting that on opposite end of the spectrum that can hash out the data together and come up with a plan so that we can get out of this thing. And I think if we could, we're missing that pillar of early, effective, cheap treatment. And then, I know this is going long, but I really wanted to mention this. This is something that I'm passionate about. And if we can learn one thing, like the third pillar for me is health prevention, health promotion. So it's not the public health prevention of spread by public health measures, but health promotion through healthy living. And we learned that with a kid going through cancer on chemo. We learned the importance of nutrition. You can't tell me that vitamin D and zinc and things like that aren't important. They're not a cure-all. That would just be ridiculous to say that. But, you know, if you're going through winter in Canada, you know, it just makes sense to have healthy, balanced nutrition. So where are the restrictions on sugar levels on pop? The public health agencies have just shown us, and I call them out, they've just shown us that they have the authority to go to great measures. They have phenomenal, sweeping legal powers to shut down businesses. Why not shut down Coca-Cola unless they... Sorry, Coca-Cola. But why not shut, you know?
You know how funny it is? What did I offer you before we started this?
A Pepsi. And
Pepsi.
But I mean, that was after paddling being out in the heat. And so there's a place for pop, right? But I mean, kids sitting inside, watch. So, the model of staying safe is being locked up at home, watching Netflix,
with
eating fast food delivered to your door by DoorDash.
Hey, it's
so these
great,
are all...
Yeah.
Huge industries.
Don't even have to walk out the door anymore.
How many billion-dollar industries are that? The entertainment industry, the fast food, junk food industry, keeping us at home, not exercising. So your kid, and what are we doing? We're putting people at risk. Like, we're putting people at risk. If people are stuck at home eating junk food on screens, they're putting up in weight, they're getting diabetes, their blood pressure's going up, and their risk is increasing. So where are the programs? Where's the health promotion to make nutritious food affordable? If we're printing money, why not give subsidies on healthy food? Like, we always speak about it here, like because fruit and vegetables are cheap in South Africa. If you eat steak, like red meat is expensive. It's a big treat. Here, it's actually cheaper to eat meat, Nelly. If you're buying a lot of fruit and vegetables, it costs a fortune. It's very easy to buy junk, to just eat processed rubbish that makes you sick. So where are the programs trying to get kids through the crisis, through the challenges, trying to get kids active, trying to get them... I mean, we are teaching them that these are patterns that they're going to take into their life. I mean, you've benefited from being, from your history in hockey.
From growing up on a farm in Saskatchewan
There
to
you
playing
go.
hockey for a good majority of my life.
Yeah, so that is the missing, those two pillars. So along with the important role that vaccines play within a ethical framework, public health measures to prevent spread, again, evidence-based and honest, and when we, and we need to look back and think, okay, how will we do things differently next time? And then, but the four legs of a chair, the other two really critical ones are early treatment, and let the clinicians on the ground figure it out. Like, why must you wait for pharmaceutical company sponsored huge randomized clinical trials when you have got a huge amount of observational data and small trials that all are showing the same signal? And we're in a crisis. When you're in a crisis, if there's a fire, you're going to use what's at hand. You're not going to use, you're going to use what's there. And and then health promotion, like nutrition, exercise, teaching people to be healthy, getting kids off screens, getting them outside, getting them active, getting them in healthy
environment
and figuring out how to give them a healthy social context while limiting spread. And I think we can definitely be a little more creative next time, and we'll be surprised at how cheap those interventions are. You can, if you've got diabetes or hypertension, you can reverse that. The industries that are making money from chronic disease want you to believe you've got it forever, so you will take pills every single day. I'm passionate about behavioral change and healthy lifestyle and lifestyle interventions, and it is awesome when you see someone who's motivated, who realizes, okay, I'm insulin resistant, I've got high blood pressure, I'm overweight, I'm heading towards a heart attack, I'm heading towards type 2 diabetes, to see them turn around and make effort through nutrition and exercise and actually reverse those processes, and end up investing in, not, getting off medication over a few months or a year, adding years to their life and healthy years, but no one makes money from that, right?
Well, normally to end this, because this has been fascinating, I really appreciate you coming in. That's at the third or fourth time I'll say that. I normally do the Crewmaster Final Five, but I think I got one question for you, and that is, if you could do this, I ask this of all my people. You could do this. You could sit in my chair and have anyone across from you. Who would you want to pick their brain on?
I would love to have someone like Dr. Pierre Corey here, or Peter McCullough, and then our local scientific advisory group, I would like to see people I would have two on the opposite end of the spectrum, and I'd like to chair or try and mediate a dialogue and try and see
what comes of that conversation.
Yeah, because that's the problem. We're speaking in echo chambers, right?
What can a guy like me, what can the population do to help? Or we just got to sit around and wait? Is there anything we can do to help doctors like yourself, like people that want to, create some discussion around what's going on in a healthy way? Is there anything the public can do to help folks like yourself?
Well, I think like I said, we need to just spot the red flags here. That the fact that I'm in a democracy in our the country with our constitution, or just with the that I would be afraid to speak about medical ethics, about autonomy, the principle of autonomy, that I would be afraid to honestly talk about risk benefit for individuals, to help families make decisions when it comes to their kids. I mean, the fact that it's scary talking about those things is simply strange, right? I never would have imagined that. Normally, in an oral exam, if you're in a family medicine exam, that's what they're looking for. Someone who demonstrates a patient-centered approach with a good ethical foundation, who understands the principles of autonomy, beneficence, non-malfeasance, and justice. To now be sharing on that, and I realize I might have accidentally said something that might be misconstrued as me saying people shouldn't get vaccinated or whatever. I really try to steer from that. I've really tried to just focus on the importance of medical ethics, and people should be able to make that informed decision based on full disclosure of risk and benefit in the context of a pandemic where they realize one of the factors is a good reason to take it is, I'm going to, I realize for me there's more risk than benefit, but I'll take it so that we can get to that number, whatever. That's legitimate and that's fine. But for people to feel coerced to do that, we need to reflect on that. And so for what the public can do, I think we need to realize we are still a democracy. We do still elect our leaders. We need to decide, do we want to go down this road? Where does this lead us in 5 years, 10 years? And I think to speak out like someone like Dr. Francis Christian, who essentially was suspended from all academic activity, and he works in an academic institution, for simply bringing up awareness of possible risk of vaccines to children. And now, the WHO brings out their recommendation, which is what he said all along. And the other thing he spoke out about was censorship of medical doctors, and he's essentially been censored. So he's sharing his story. And I think it's sad that we've gotten to that point, and that we can't sit around a table and dialogue. I don't know. How does one support him? I don't know.
I assume by getting the story out and talking about it and opening up that dialogue. Right? That's what I'm hoping I'm doing here. I'm hoping that people listen and start to think about it. Start to have the lovely thing about a podcast is you can be driving to work by yourself and put on whatever you want and listen to it, and it can spur on thoughts. Yeah. And the lovely thing about a podcast is it can be heard around the world. It's as simple as, you want to flick it on. It's right at your fingertips. We have the ability to have any conversation you want, and they're out there. You just got to go looking for them. There's some great ones. Yeah. And I hope that's what I'm doing here. I hope by having you on, it opened some dialogue. I'm hoping it got some people thinking. Because anytime you can do that, that's just what I think. That's what this is all about. Is opening up people's thoughts and critical thinking. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on. I've kept you here longer than I thought I was, but
it's a huge. We could chat about this for days.
Well, regardless, I appreciate you coming in and sitting. I know this can't be the easiest thing to sit down, or maybe it is. I don't know. But I really appreciate you coming in and allowing my curiosity to spur on a couple different avenues and hearing personally why you're sitting in the chair and everything else. It's been really enjoyable getting to sit to know you for the first time and first time meeting you. Yeah. And hearing some of your thoughts. So thank you for coming in.
Great. And next time, offer me a beer, not just a Pepsi.
That's a deal. Hey, folks, thanks for joining us today. If you just stumbled on the show, please click subscribe. Then scroll to the bottom and rate and leave a review. I promise it helps. Remember, every Monday and Wednesday, we will have a new guest sitting down to share their story. The Sean Newman Podcast is available for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcast fix. Until next time.